Alright friends, the new Warframe Devstream has just concluded, and you know what that means. It's that time again, the Devstream Recap. In this video, we're going to talk about what was spoken about, and let me just tell you, this Devstream was quite something. We're going to get into that. But we also got a little sneak peek as to what the next update might hold. First of all though, make sure to follow me on Twitch if you haven't already. We are regularly live. For example, today before the Devstream had a lot of fun. Big shoutouts to all our generous channel members who helped me keep the lights on, and now let's jump right into it. Okay, so the first topic on today's list might sound a little bit boring, but I personally find it actually very interesting. As you might remember, not too long ago, DE have opened up a survey where they were asking basically all of us players various questions as to what we think about the current state of the game. 69,000 whole people answered this survey, and in this dev stream, we got a recap on what the general sense of the community was like, and I want to go over that for a second because I find it actually very interesting. First of all, and that really surprised me, was a question, what your mastery rank is and when we started playing Warframe. And what surprised me so much here was that a lot of the people who answered the survey said that they started playing in 2013 and that they are very close or already at Mastery Rank 35, aka Legendary 5, which, to be honest, makes it seem like there aren't that many new players in the game, and there are still a lot of veterans from the very early days who are still actively playing. But, and this is the very big but that we need to keep in mind when we look at those statistics, this was a survey that was announced on Devstream as well as on DE's social media, so I think we do have a very heavy bias here in the data, meaning that, of course, hardcore fans of the game who have been in the game for very long are naturally much more likely to see these posts and to participate in the ensuing survey, whereas quote-unquote normal casual players who just boot up the game on Steam and play a little bit here and there probably wouldn't have even noticed that there is a survey in the first place. So before we jump to conclusions when we see stats like these and say, oh, the game is dying, there are no new players coming in, we gotta remember that this data here is heavily skewed towards later and more experienced players, which, in my opinion, makes it even more interesting that we have quite a peak in new players coming into the game in 2023, 2024, and already a lot for 2025, even though the first quarter is just over. So if we factor in the bias that is most likely there, this shows us that Warframe has actually grown quite a bit over the last 2 years, and if you ask me, that's definitely a W in my books. Up next, we have questions regarding certain game mechanics, like which types of game modes you play a lot, what do you think about the helmet system, how important Steel Path is, which is nice but also not that interesting in my opinion. What was much more surprising though was that a lot of players who participated in the survey found that the Kim system, you know, the chatting system in Warframe 1999, was actually really good. I would have thought that probably most people sort of see it as a nice to have thing, but not that essential. Wouldn't have thought that almost 50% of surveyed people say it's amazing. Also, very interesting to see that Deviri apparently is the most liked open world. If I take a look at my comments, all I see is people complain about Deviri, but probably our community was not all that much represented in the survey, it seems. And of course, the most important ones, can bugs get pregnant? Yes, no, or what the heck are you even asking here? If you don't know, that's an inside joke from one of the dev shorts, and not gonna lie, I just find it hilarious that they bring these things up. Now, finally, they finished up with a question, in 2025, I want devs to focus more on, and this makes it very obvious that people want to see more endgame, like the name couldn't even be fatter here on screen. So I hope that they might cook up something nice for this year. But in case you're not all that much into numbers, don't worry, there were actually surprisingly interesting topics in this dev stream which I thought would kind of be more of a filler, and one of those topics would be that we will see a whole bunch of new fashion coming up very soon, specifically, and I want to start out with this, a new Kullervo Deluxe skin, namely the one that they showcased as a concept art in one of the previous dev streams, and now we gotta see him in-game, and I gotta say, the man looks just amazing. I'm gonna get this skin as soon as it drops. I think for all the Kullervo enjoyers out there, this one is much overdue, big W in my books. But when it comes to fashion, that is still not it. We have also a new Zaku skin. You can see it on screen in the background right now. Plus, even more Ws because the Wolf of Saturn 6 armor set, which apparently a lot of you really like, will be added in the Nora Nightwave shop. So going forward, you will be able to just buy it from Nightwave credits in case you don't have it. Everybody can get it all the time, which is very nice. And as you also see in the background right here, we have new Tenogen options coming in. For example, an Entradi-themed Arca-Plasmor skin, a very nice infested sort of looking Hildren skin, plus some armor sets and juicy operator cosmetics. And speaking of Nightwave, the new Nightwave season is gonna come relatively soon at the 21st of May. We're gonna have Nightwave Season 9, so make sure to get your current Nightwave done until then. Don't miss out on that and spend all your Nightwave credits because they do not carry over. Keep that one in mind. And the next big topic I want to talk about is quality of life, because with the next mainline update, which will probably be in June, we will see much more of that, and I can't wait for it. There's some big W's hidden in there as well. First of all, we gotta talk about Archimedia. I also talked about this on the stream a lot because I always found it bothersome that in the Archimedia screen, it shows you what you gotta take for this week's run, but then you gotta go out of the screen and change your setup, and maybe you have to go in and double check if you got everything. Going forward, in the deep Archimedia screen, just like on the star chart, you're gonna be able to swap your loadout without having to leave the screen, which is super duper convenient, and I can't wait for this to get implemented. Up next, and this is something that actually surprised me, it took them 12 years to implement, but I guess better late than never. We have better weapon and Warframe categorization in our loadout screen. So for example, for our Warframes, they will now be grouped up into stuff like tank, damage dealer, support Warframe, and for the weapons, they won't only be subdivided into primary, secondary, and melee, but you're now also going to have different loadout pages for assault rifles, for shotguns, for bows, for sniper rifles, as you also see in the background right here. This, I think, brings a lot of order into the mix. Very nice. I think Warframe should have had that years ago already, so I'm very happy about it. Plus, they also said that they want to make the search function for mods even stronger, so that, for example, in the future, you don't have to type in ability strength if you want to search for strength mods, but you can just, for example, click on a stat on a mod, and it will automatically search for similar stats in your mod arsenal. But that's still not all. Another very great thing is that going forward, removing Archon shards will not be as painful anymore, because while today every removal costs bile resource, going forward, differently colored Archon shards will take different types of resources to be removed, so it's not going to be as much of a strain on your bile bucket. And also, non-Tauforge shards will only cost half to remove as Tauforge shards, which is super duper convenient, especially if you are a certain YouTuber who likes to test out builds and has to remove those shards all the time. Next, let's talk about Caliban, because if you are a Caliban enjoyer, then you eat good tonight. Caliban finally gets his first augment, and I think this one is gonna make him even better than he already is. Let's get into it. First of all, this augment is really special because it marked the first time, I think, that they performed live coding on screen on the dev stream, showing exactly how augments are coded, how augments are developed, and to be fair, I just find it really awesome that they showcase more and more of the behind the scenes to also give a bit of a stage to the people who are not in front of the camera, but shouldering all the hard work that goes into making this game for us. But of course, I hear you want to know more about the augment, so let's talk about it. This augment will be for Razor Gyre, you know, the spin to win skill from Caliban where you regain shields and heal a bit of health and all whatnot. This one will now work very similarly to a Naro spin to win attack, in that it will also group up enemies in a blob in front of you, but not just that, it will also make that your little artillery summons, I forgot the name, will be repositioned right next to the blob of enemies, automatically start gunning their artillery into the blob with even a little fire rate buff. So, as you also see in the background right here, this looks really strong. I can't wait to test this out, and once it drops, of course, we're gonna have an updated Caliban build, so if you don't have already, then you might want to think about maybe leaving the channel a sub. But yeah, one big disclaimer here, of course, What you're seeing in the background is very raw dev build footage, so don't expect this to be implemented into the game one-to-one as you see it right here, right? There will be changes, but I think they already gave us a pretty good idea of what we can expect with this augment. Next, we have a little bit of a smaller topic, but I wanted to mention it nonetheless, and that is that we get a brand new event coming very soon, next Friday already. It's a Galleon of Ghouls event where we're gonna help Counselor Veheg to clear a Grineer Galleon from ghouls, but it's not just gonna be a standard gameplay mission, it's actually kind of a silly event where you're gonna get a modified Ogress weapon, that is the only weapon that you can use. You're also not gonna have skills, not gonna have gear, so you have to use that, and it will be a self-damaging grenade launcher, so it's gonna be some silly fun in there. From what they said, it's gonna be a capture mission and you're gonna be able to win some Grineer weaponry out of it. In general, as you're also gonna see in the background, I think I just add up some clips here, they did a lot of funny, silly stuff there, like for example, making enemies dance, turning Venari into a biker. I don't even remember everything, I'm just gonna give you some quick impressions in the background here. If you don't want to miss out on all of the fun, then just watch the whole live stream recording. You can find it on the Warframe official channels on YouTube and on Twitch. But before we end this video, we actually have a bit more of a serious topic to talk about with regards to Warframe's next big step, because they just so happen to tease a teensy tiny little tidbit of information about the next big story update. So let's get into that. Now, at the very end of the dev stream, they showcased a brand new enemy type in the simulacrum. It is kind of a murmur-looking flying enemy that shoots grenades at you, but what I personally find much more interesting is that for a split second, you could see the work-in-progress name of that enemy, and that is Lotus Language Deviri Murmur Name. Now, purely from the visual aspect, yes, this totally looks like a murmur enemy, not really like a sentient, which kinda sorta could mean that the thesis that I had in the last dev stream that we might potentially go to Tau in the future, maybe that thesis was not all too right. Maybe it's gonna go further into the murmur Deviri side of things, but then again, my guess is as good as yours. Maybe it's just some silly naming conventions and it has nothing to do with the actual lore behind this enemy. But what I do know for sure, because that is what they said, is that in 2 weeks already, May the 10th, they're gonna have a live stream from PAX East, and that is where they want to reveal the first big trailer, the first big information about the next main update, which is gonna happen in December. Of course, I'm going to keep you up to date and make a Devstream recap also on that dev stream, so if you don't want to miss out on that, you know where the sub button is. Another massive shout out to Niels V, Demon Lord Zell, Demon Emperor, Emperor Prime, Nostalix Gaming, Turtlepeer, Lycon Shepherd, Onakaneo2, Pepperwolf, Mihawky, Phil the Meme, Ben Spence, Leo Murasaki, and all other generous channel members for your continuous support. We see each other hopefully in the next one. Have a beautiful weekend. Don't miss out on the live streams, the link in the description, and as always, good loot.